Congressman Rob Wittman is with us. He's going to pop in for a second. We can't go to an advance live without Congressman Rob Wittman being with us, representing the 1st District of Virginia Republican. Congressman, it's always good to have you live here.
John, it's great to be here. What a great day. Gosh, this is exciting. Lots of people here, lots of great conversations taking place about not only what we see today happening in Washington and potentially what's happening in Richmond, but a lot of excitement about where does the Republican Party go in relation to the challenges we have out there, and how do we provide solutions to the everyday problems that people face. I think people are so tired of the politics that they hear with impeachment. They want us to be working on prescription drug reform, on passing the USMCA, those kinds of things, getting the military funded. So this is an exciting time to be here to talk about, what are our ideas. Our party has always been about ideas, and how do we put those ideas into practice. So a lot of great conversations taking place here.
Congressman, let's talk about the economic jobs report yesterday, which is the best that I've seen. I'm 61 years old in my lifetime.
Yes.
Even when great ones come out, there's always some caveat of underlying, well, there's not manufacturing jobs, or, well, wages aren't going up, or, well, there's a currency devaluation. There's always something. You look at this jobs report yesterday, it was incredible. The number of jobs created, the economic boom that we're having, the rise in wages. I mean, if you looked at that yesterday, even Kramer, who does a show, who's a liberal Democrat, says it all the time, said he had never seen an economic report like this in his entire career.
It's amazing, John. Think about the foundation that this creates for the future economic development in this nation. 266,000 new jobs, record low unemployment, essentially full employment. We haven't seen this in 50 years. We know, too, that this does a lot of different things. It drives our economy. As you said, the job growth is across all sectors, not just in one sector, but all sectors, including manufacturing. You look at what that does to wages. This creates upward pressure on wages. So with more competition, there are more demand for those jobs, and therefore employers pay more to get the employees that they need. As I talk to businesses across the 1st District, the biggest single issue that they face, John, are workers. In fact, many of them said, I could expand my business tomorrow if I could find employees there to work. So that's a great problem to have. I think it bodes well for the future of the economy here, and I think it's a combination of several things that have led to that. First of all is great tax policy, freeing up dollars to be reinvested in companies. I believe that's the best use of dollars. And then secondly is the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework has been greatly reduced, and it's been made more logical. You saw the numbers that came out recently where essentially for every one new regulation being put in place, the president required 2 to be taken off the books. We've seen, I believe I saw almost a 7-fold decrease.
7 to 1, yes.
Yeah, 7 to 1 decrease in existing regulations, which really clears the way for businesses to do the things that they know how to do. So all of those things combined together, I think, creates not just a great jobs report now, but a great opportunity in the months and years to come for this economy to grow even more.
The Congressman, also, when you look at that tax bill that the president passed, and I know you were a big part of that, one of the other things we're seeing the benefit now of is the $1 trillion of U.S. money, cash that was parked overseas,
yes,
right? Which is now, it took a 12-month cycle for it to start to come back now. That is flowing into the economy. Mm-hmm. You look at the economic report yesterday come out of Canada. Canada lost 70,000 jobs last month. 70,000. Now, they have 1/10 the population that we have. That would be like the United States losing 700,000 jobs in 1 month. That would be forget recession, that would be a depression.
Yes.
They lost 70,000 jobs. We're the envy of the world. All of the global investment now is flowing into the U.S. because people all over the globe see us as the best investment. Other economies are stagnant or going backwards. Ours is going forward.
It is, and it's a variety of things. It's because people are positive about the future. They're willing to risk their money, and that's a big thing in the business community. Are you willing to risk money to grow your business, or do you put it in a safer investment? Businesses now believe in the future, which is great. You brought up a great point, $1 trillion plus being repatriated into the United States. Those dollars are being reinvested in businesses. They also make their way into other investment vehicles. for money to be available now for other businesses to borrow. So it really has a multiplier effect on what happens to our nation's economy. So, I think there's even better things to come in the future as you look at the underlying data behind this jobs report and what has led to this incredible sustained economic upswing that we're on.
So with this tremendous economy, the other thing is wages are up. This is the other untold story that the fake news will not tell anybody. But wages for average Americans have gone up. So when you look at the economic numbers and the revitalization, this isn't just for the corporate elites. This isn't for the executive. These are for what I call the strivers in the economy, Congressman. The people that are at B, they want to get to C. They're at A, they want to get to B. The strivers, opportunity for them is rising.
That's right. Well, and the really exciting part about this, John, is that unemployment is down in all sectors of the economy for all socioeconomic groups, as well as African Americans, Latinos, Asians, all those groups, women, all those groups, we see unemployment at record lows. What's going hand in hand with that, too, is wage growth. Wage growth for those individual groups, as well as in total, is going up significantly. It's continued on that upward track. That, I think, is a function of lower unemployment, because when the demand for jobs goes up, wages automatically come up because the competition that has to go in to be able to pay people more. I argue that's a much more effective way to put people, as you said, on a career ladder. It's much better than minimum wage that says, okay, we're going to ascribe you to this, no matter how it sounds in relation to what you're making. It, unfortunately, I think, holds people at that level. So if you say $15 minimum wage, many times businesses say, well, that's going to be the top. That's not a minimum wage. It ends up being a maximum wage. I want people to say, listen, I'm willing to start at less than $15 an hour, but I want to work my way up. I want businesses to have a career ladder there for me, and I think minimum wage gets in the way of that. So that's why I like the policy of maximum wage. Let's have an economy that's growing, that grows wages, that lowers unemployment, that provides multiple opportunities for people that they can get on a career ladder. I mean, we look when our economy works best. It's, as you said, it's when people can move up, when they can work hard in a job, they can increase their skills, they can move up to another job with increased responsibility that pays more. That's the American dream. I don't want somebody to be in a job and say, hey, here you are, minimally qualified job, $15 an hour, and that's all they get. I mean, that is creating a ceiling on their wages. So it is indeed becomes a maximum wage. I want to make sure we're doing more to grow the economy across.
Well, this is the opportunity economy, right? There's no question about it. And we're with Congressman Rob Wittman. We're live at the Republican Party of Virginia Advance at the Omni Hotel. The Congressman, Republican, representing the 1st District of Virginia. And Congressman, you're right. I mean, the artificial minimum wage now becomes a ridiculous argument because you can't find people in Virginia that are going to work for $7 or $8 an hour, right? They're not out there. They're impossible to find. I mean, I've got openings in my radio station. We've advertised for weeks, and believe me, we don't pay $7 an hour, and we just can't find people. You can't find anybody. That's like you said, that's a great problem to have. All right, we got a couple more minutes. The impeachment fiasco. So Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, the other day, we talked about this for a minute, pulled the plug on Chairman Nadler. So that's done. Looks like she's going for impeachment. And I can't imagine she'd come on the balcony if she didn't have the votes.
I think she probably does. Apparently they had a closed-door caucus meeting the other day. Allegedly the conversation is that she didn't have anybody object to this. I do believe there will probably be some members that will vote no. The interesting thing is going to be, John, is what comes before the Congress. The Judiciary Committee on Monday will have one last hearing. The lawyer from the Republican side, the lawyer from the Democrat side, they'll both make an argument about why they believe the information in front of them does or does not constitute impeachable offenses under Article 2, Section 4. So that'll be it, and then they'll come up with their bill, they'll mark it up, and it'll pass purely on partisan lines, and then it'll go to the Rules Committee and then come to the floor. The question is going to be, what will be in the articles of impeachment? Will it be based upon the transcript with President Zelensky? Will it go into the Mueller report? We've heard that it may include other things outside of the hearing and the information about the conversation with President Zelensky. So that'll be interesting to see. If you go back to the Clinton impeachment, you saw that there were multiple articles of impeachment, and some members voted for and some members voted against those articles of impeachment. In fact, in Virginia, Virgil Goode, who at the time was a Democrat, voted in favor of some of those articles of impeachment against President Clinton and voted against some. Even Jim Moran, who was a Democrat at the time, voted for some of those articles of impeachment and against others. I suspect what you may see is that some Democrats, especially from these 31 districts that voted for Trump, may vote for some articles of impeachment and against others. So but again, it'll all depend on what's in the articles of impeachment. So that's going to be the very interesting thing to see. I do think that they obviously are going to put those forward because the Speaker gave the green light. They will be voted out of the Judiciary Committee purely on a partisan vote, the same on the Rules Committee. The interesting thing will be what comes to the House floor and how the vote dynamic happens on the House floor.
That's going to be fun to watch this week, or interesting. Maybe not fun for the president, but interesting. But then there's people like me that believe, look, go ahead and impeach him on a partisan basis. I mean, probably at least I would think 8-10 Democrats are going to vote no on everything, trying to save their seats. They've two have already come out no, and you'll probably have 6-8 more. And then they're going to be tied in knots because this is the other problem. You vote for impeachment on one, you don't vote for the other. If they have obstruction of justice and bribery, how do you vote no on bribery and yes on obstruction? If there's no bribery, how's there obstruction? The whole thing becomes a hodgepodge. It's a mess.
Yeah, as I said, the real interesting part of this will be what will be in the articles of impeachment. That is going to really tell us everything about the path. And then, too, if some people decide to vote for some articles of impeachment and against others, it'll be interesting how they are able to parse that out, if that indeed happens.
Then they're going to have to go to the voters in these Trump districts and explain that. And the other thing is the trial is going to go to the Senate. And I'm for, as the president has said, he wants a full, open, and transparent trial. Bring all the witnesses in. Subpoena Adam Schiff. Well, Adam Schiff has to be there, right? Because he's going to be presenting the case.
Right.
So there's no subpoena. So does Nadler. They have to be there. But, they're going to call Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. They're going to call and McConnell controls it all.
That's right. He does. And then it'll be interesting to see, too, who the House selects as impeachment managers. If you remember, Lindsey Graham was an impeachment manager back during the Clinton impeachment when he was in the House. So it'll be interesting to see who they select there. And that'll tell a lot about what tack they take when it gets over to the Senate.
They're looking, everything that Pelosi does is based on polling numbers, right? We both know that. That's how they run the caucus. She's got to be looking at these numbers now. Congressman Wittman, every day they're getting worse for her in these swing states and swing districts that Trump won. And I bet she's really questioning herself why she ever got involved in this.
Well, it's interesting. She did an interview the other day that I heard, and she was asked, what if this impeachment vote costs you the House? And she seemed to say it didn't matter.
She did say that. It didn't matter. She was doing the right thing, and
now
she threw caution to the wind, she said.
That's right. Well, it'll be interesting to see if her members feel the same way, because there's, I always tell folks there's a lot to this, and I would take issue when she says that the facts are uncontested. I think there is a contesting of what's been presented, what that means, what ultimately it does in measuring up to Article 2, Section 4. Does it rise to the level of treason, bribery, high crimes, or misdemeanors? And you heard Jonathan Turley testify the other day. I thought he was very, very direct and to the point about saying, hey, listen, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm looking at this purely from a constitutional standpoint, not from a political standpoint. And I thought he was very insightful in how he saw the process. So I think all those things are underlying this whole process. And I know as I talk to people across my district, the majority of people, unless they're really deeply involved in politics on either side, most people are just saying, I'm tuning this out. It's too much in the weeds. This is all politics. It's all about division. What I hear mostly from people, John, is why aren't you getting the work of the nation done? Why aren't you getting the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement done? Why aren't you getting prescription drug reform done? Why aren't you getting our nation's military funded? I mean, they look at this and have a deep concern about it's being so divisive to the country that it's getting in the way of what needs to get done. I think that weighs heavily on people's minds too. So the speaker can talk about all the elements of impeachment, but when the vast majority of time has been spent over the past 3 years now on these hearings and continuing to stay after the president and not at least an equal focus, I would argue a greater focus on getting the nation's work done, I think people get frustrated and say, wait a minute, what's going on?
Well, we're not getting anything done. It is the do-nothing Congress. So let's get to some of these things. And let's start with probably the easiest one, which is USMCA, which is going to add a full 1% to GDP. It's billions of dollars. Now the speaker just kicked it back and said it's got to go back to Canada. What are they doing with that?
I know. Well, she's talking about enforcement. She was saying there are issues with enforcement. As you know, because there is an expiration on the action by Canada, it does have to go back to Canada. So what she is saying was we need to make some changes to it. Yeah, listen, that further complicates things. I think if it came to the floor in the House of Representatives today, I think it would pass. Mm-hmm. But if you now inject politics into it, it makes it a much more arduous process. I think she ought to bring it to the floor. It ought to pass. We shouldn't be in a situation of saying we're waiting for Canada. Canada's already passed this once. So it becomes even more complicated if you say, well, now we're going to change it. We already have a deal that was worked out and people agreed to. Now we're going to change it and send it back to Canada.
And to Mexico.
Into Mexico.
It's got to go back to Mexico.
They would have to.
So it's going to go back to their governments. Got to go through the same process again.
That's right.
Waste time. We've already had a deal,
That's
and
right.
now she kicked it back. It's all because she doesn't want to give the president a victory, but it's a victory for the American people. This is why this doesn't make any sense.
It is. Yeah. Listen. It's a victory.
It's going to
for
backfire
our
on
economy.
them.
It's a victory for the American people. It's a victory for jobs. This is long time in coming. And you should set politics aside. Listen, I understand if you have political differences, but you need to put those in the back seat when it comes to what's good for America. This trade agreement is good for America.
Right.
And that should be job one. It shouldn't be about, who gets political credit. Give the president credit. He said, listen, I don't care who gets credit. If Nancy Pelosi wants to take full credit for it, I don't care. Let her take credit
Right, he doesn't
for it.
care.
Let's just get it done. So he's put the politics and the credit element in the back seat and said, listen, let's just do what's right for the country.
Let's get to another issue, which I keep bringing attention to, which is there's legislation in Congress to address what we call surprise medical billing. Mm-hmm. And Congressman Wittman, this is an issue that affects middle America so much.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't have the perfect Cadillac insurance out there. Mm-hmm. They either can't afford Obamacare, so they have different pieces of it. They go to the doctor, they go to the hospital, and then they get a bill in the mail, surprise bill, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, $12,000.
That's right.
They don't even know where it came from. Mm-hmm. They can't pay it. Their salary gets garnished. They get judgments against them. They have to hire attorneys. We have several bills in Congress to fix this. The best one, I believe, takes the patient out of the negotiation because I don't want to be negotiating with people. But I got one of these. I went in for something. I got a $7,000, $7,200 bill in the mail. I had no idea what it was.
Sure.
So this is hurting middle America. How do we stop this, and which approach addressing it do you favor?
Well, listen, I favor the one that you spoke about, and that is having a mediator, somebody that looks at both sides fairly and says, okay, we're going to come to a reasonable agreement on this, instead of you having to defend yourself against the biller.
Right.
And sometimes it's not the hospital. Sometimes it's an agency that's collecting for the hospital. And that becomes an even bigger issue because the hospital now has separated themselves from it, so you can't even go talk to people who you may know in the community that are part of the hospital. So I think you have to say, listen, we're going to have a standard for mediation or arbitration, however you want to term it, and that it's binding, so the outcome is binding to both sides, and that there's a fair hearing of the facts behind that, a fair transparency in the charges. I think all those things are incredibly important because many times what happens, as you know, in this surprise billing is you had no idea that the things that were related to your hospital stay or the services provided were even part of that, and you had no idea what your insurance was or was not paying. So when there's no transparency up front, anybody that reads their insurance policy today, it's incredibly difficult, I would say almost impossible to figure out what does it pay for, what doesn't it pay for, and the only way you figure it out is when you get the bill. And then many people just throw their hands up and go, I don't know what I really have in my insurance policy and not, and then you find yourself with these judgments because you don't have the wherewithal to be able to fight this. I want to make sure we have a process that errs on the side of protecting the patient and making sure the patient can provide their information and said, listen, here's the deal, and make sure, too, that they're being treated fairly by not just the agency that may be trying to collect the money, but also the hospital and what they're billing. Another element, too, with this, John, is transparency in charges. Because hospitals negotiate rates with insurance companies, but if you're a retail customer and come in, you pay the full retail rate. I want to make sure that there's transparency there so we know what is the hospital being paid by Medicare, what are they being paid by Medicaid, what are they being paid by the insurance companies, so that if you're asked to pay that deductible part of the bill, you know what is the absolute charge, and then what did they bill the insurance company for? Many times you can't see that, so transparency has to be part of that too if you're going to have a full and fair hearing of the facts to determine, what do you owe, and then what's a fair disposition of what the hospital says that you owe to them or the doctor says that you owe to them.
And so you're opposed also then to the government just come in and to a federal entity just come in and setting the rates.
No, I think government rate setting is a mistake. I think
Why?
It's problematic. Well, it's problematic for the patient because, again, they don't know what those rates are going to be set at, and they can go all over the place. And then, too, for the providers, instead of reflecting a reasonable cost structure for providers, a great example is rural hospitals. Rural hospitals see a much greater mix of Medicare and Medicaid patients. If the government comes in and says, listen, we're going to dictate what you get reimbursed, if it's below the cost of service, what happens to those hospitals?
Goes out of business.
They go out of business, and we see a bunch of them have already gone out, and the last thing we need in rural areas is hospitals going out of business. I want to make sure, too, that consumers have transparency and know. I don't want the government setting the rate and then finding out, gosh, the rate is too high and we're spending too much money there. I want consumers to know what the rate is so they can look at it and compare and go, oh, well, this is what this doctor charges, this is what this other doctor charges, this is what this hospital charges, this is what another charges, so you can compare those rates and know what you are getting for what you are requesting in service. I think that transparency is incredibly important. So government rate fixing doesn't serve the best interest of the patients because it doesn't mean that you're getting best value for the dollars, and it's problematic for hospitals that have a disproportionate rate of Medicaid and Medicare payers.
So is there a specific bill or a specific legislation on the table now, Congressman Rob Wittman, that you back? Endorse?
Well, listen, I think there are several out there that are more based upon transparency and arbitration to be able to settle these things. I'm in favor of those types of bills. I think there are good parts of each of them, so I haven't jumped on and signed on to any one bill, but I think you take the best of those bills and bring them together. I am not for government price setting or government price fixing. I think that is problematic and doesn't, in the long term, best serve the patient or the provider. Let me tell you, we need the providers out there, and I want to make sure that we're not doing things that put them out of business.
Exactly. All right. Final thing, I know you've got to get to other meetings. Prescription drugs.
Yes. Well, here's the bottom line. I want to make sure that prescription drugs in the United States are priced the same way they are in other countries, because there's no reason why you can buy the same name brand prescription drug in Europe cheaper than you can in the United States, or the same drug cheaper in Canada than you can in the United States. And I'm not just talking about it by small margins, I'm talking about large margins.
Right.
So the question is how do these pharmaceutical companies then allocate their cost for research and development and allocate their cost for marketing? I want to make sure that there's a level playing field there and say, listen, there needs to be a single market approach to how that happens. And again, some folks have said, well, you just do that by capping how much drug companies in the United States can charge. Again, another element of government setting the prices, I want to make sure that there's transparency there so that we know fully what's the cost behind this particular pharmaceutical? And why are these costs much higher in the United States to be able to drive prices down? And some of the question is as well, now do you allow people legally to buy these pharmaceuticals overseas? You know, FDA has a requirement to say, listen, we oversee these pharmaceuticals here. We think they're manufactured to a higher standard, that they're safer, and therefore you can't buy from out of the country. I think all those things need to be addressed in how you bring down the cost of prescription drugs. And again, it goes back to the payers determining, you know, what do the payers have as far as their cost, and then what are they negotiating with insurance companies? Some of the biggest purchaser of pharmaceuticals is Medicare.
Right.
Right now, people go to the marketplace and they get to choose which of their suppliers provides their pharmaceuticals for them. Why not use that whole pool of Medicare insurees to go out to the pharmaceutical companies and said, listen, here we are. Here are the hundreds of thousands or millions of patients in Medicare. Bid on their business. I guarantee you could get prices lower if you bid on that group as a whole rather than having every one of those individuals go to a marketplace and pick this plan or that plan or the other plan. So again, competition is a good thing. Transparency is a good thing. I think all those things can help bring down prescription drug prices.
I want to thank Congressman Rob Wittman for being with us. He's the ranking member on the Sea Power Readiness Committee in the House, and he is also, now we could call him a veteran legislator, right? A veteran congressman representing the 1st District of Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area, of which we cover all of his district every day. And Rob Wittman, I'm going to give him a shout out. He's been coming on my show every week for 10 years?
10 years. Yes.
10 years. Every single week he's come on my show for 10 years. And only missing when one of us is on vacation.
That's right.
Or when you're on assignment out of the country.
That's right.
And you
That's
can't
right.
call in on the secured phone, whenever
right.
that is. Congressman, thank you for being with us.
John, thank you so much.
Your knowledge,
You
it's
have a
always
blessed
so,
weekend.
this is kind of an expanded thing, and just